Good afternoon, everybody. This is Heather Turner, and this afternoon we will be talking about blogging for business. This session is being recorded. If you have questions, please go down to the chat bar on the right of your screen, and please ask questions, and I will try to address them at the end of the webinar. There are some handouts today. Again, to the right-hand side, there are 4 of them. Please make sure you download them before we end the presentation. If you do forget, I would be happy to mail them out. So I do have a quick question. So how many of you have a blog already? If you would put it into the chat bar, that would be appreciated. Okay, it looks like a couple of people do have blogs, and a couple of people have not yet started blogging. And a couple of people have started blogs but have not put anything yet in there. So that's quite interesting. So when I start describing blogs, I'd like to think of a walnut. So this is your brain. And one of the things that people think about when they say you should be blogging for business, is they think about, this is blogging, which is a bunch of mixed nuts. And this is what your brain feels like when someone says you should be blogging. To me, blogging should be more like this. It should be a lovely piece of rich chocolate cake, because that's the final results of what you get out of blogging for your business, but you don't get all the calories and all the long-term benefits of it. You just get the pleasure of actually eating the chocolate cake. Now, if you have not started blogging before, I'm just going to go over a couple of quick things about blogging and the different platforms that are out there. The first one is Blogger. It's blogger.com, and Blogger is owned by Google. Google loves its own products, and one of the reasons I start with Blogger is because Blogger is by far one of the easiest blogging platforms out there to use, and it's the most easy to customize. My feeling about Blogger is if you can use regular Microsoft Word or whatever word processing format that you're using, Blogger is actually even easier than that. And if you use a word processing document, I actually recommend starting your blogs in that word processing document, and then you can just cut and paste and format into Blogger itself. The next is WordPress, wordpress.com. This is the free online hosted version of WordPress. And then there's also wordpress.org. And I bring up the difference because wordpress.com does have ads. You can pay, I think it's about $25 a year now for no ads that show up on the bottom of your blog posts. And WordPress.org is something that has a lot more customizability, but you also need to pay for hosting, you need to pay for a domain name, and you really need someone that's a bit technically oriented to install it for you. So there is kind of a big difference between that. A common question that I've gotten is, can I start out with Blogger and then switch over to WordPress or back and forth? And you can absolutely. I would say, depending on what you're using it for, depending on how comfortable you are with technology, start an account on both Blogger and on WordPress and play around with the back end, see what you can do to customize it, and figure out which one you'd like to use, and then delete the one that you're not going to. If you decide to start out on Blogger, for example, and then move up to WordPress or move over to WordPress as the case may be, or vice versa, I really recommend don't delete your old blog. Don't transfer the content from your old blog. Either leave it there, because what will happen is if you either delete it or you transfer the content, you lose any search engine optimization value that you get out of the blog. The best way to do that is actually put a last post on your older blog saying, we've decided to move to a different platform. Please follow us here and give the blog link for the new blog address on it. There's also Tumblr.com, and Tumblr.com is primarily used for people that are doing a lot of photography. Realistically, there's over 150 blogging platforms out there. There's also some paid platforms. You can use pretty much any blogging platform that you like. I'm just bringing up the most common ones. All of the content in general and all of the different platforms, Google and Yahoo and Bing and some of the other smaller search engines out there, they don't really care which platform you're using because it's the content that's important. Now, this is an example of a Blogger blog and a website, just in terms of how much you can customize each blog itself. So this is the website right here on the left, and this is her Blogger blog. As you can see, you've transferred the same background color, the same menus, and a lot of the other customization that the website has. This is an example of an HTML website, and this is a WordPress blog that's been customized to match it. You also, because WordPress.org is now being used for so many websites and so many new website designs, the software itself has a container in it that already contains a blog. And there is not really any difference between, a self-contained blog that's already in a WordPress website versus having a WordPress blog itself. You're going to want to think about connecting things a little bit differently when you're, showing people back and forth. Like if you're referring something on your website versus referring to it on an external blog, you're just going to link things differently. But realistically, the content is the value you get out of it, again, not the platform. Now this is socialmediaexaminer.com. If you're not familiar with this, I would really suggest checking this out and going and signing up for their newsletter. Very, very informative newsletter. Every year they come out with social media marketing industry report, and blogging itself kind of remains around, between 50 and 60% every year and has for years. This particular year, from the 2015, they actually took this out of this category, so I don't have a 2015 to share to you, because they took it out of what they're describing as social media platform, and they're now calling it content. So from that perspective of what are the commonly used types of content for content to put on your other social media, social being, engaging with people, content being what's driving search engine optimization, both for your blog, for your website, and for your business. And this is interesting because in terms of blogging, this is a very high percentile of what types of content both you would be putting out there as your business or repurposing other people's blogs. And what I mean by that is if you're in a particular business doing, let me find something interesting, mergers and acquisitions, for example. And if you have a mergers and acquisitions business, you may be creating your own blog content, but there's also a lot of other mergers and acquisitions firms like mergers and acquisitions, or I think it's called M&A Source, that has its own online content that you can actually utilize and share. And you're not taking their content, you're repurposing it. So what you would be doing is if they came out with a blog once a week or once every couple of weeks, you would take their title of their blog, their URL of the particular blog you're talking about, and then perhaps using that as your social media post for other social media platforms you might be on. And in addition, it would help if you put, here's a great blog from M&A Source. Today they're talking about particular ways to exit your business, and this is why this particular blog post is interesting. And these are some interesting statistics as well in terms of business-to-business marketers are more likely to use blogging versus business to consumers, but that 64% of people is still pretty high. Now, the most important content for marketers is this is a big number in here, the 45%, and it is important. It goes through, how important it is. And then this is important as well for those of you that are self-employed or sole proprietors. 57% said blogging was the most important. And when Social Media Examiner goes out and does their surveys, I put a lot of weight by what they bring back in terms of results, because these are not surveys that are surveying, 100 people. They're servicing and surveying thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So they have a very good benchmark and baseline in terms of, who is out there, what they are doing, and it's a good cross section of the population. So blogging is still important. You may hear from some marketers that blogging is dying. I do not agree with that at all. I see more and more blogs coming out every year, every month, every day, and they've been saying that about blogging for years and years, but it hasn't seemed to be dying. It just seems to be gaining in strength. Now, the biggest excuse for blogging is there is no time. And I know everybody is very short on time out there, but that's something that you really have to put into a schedule. And the other major excuse that I hear is, I'm a bad writer. Well, you don't necessarily even have to write yourself for your blog if you have employees or staff that are good writers, or if you're a writer that's going to be factual instead of entertaining. That does not necessarily count against you if you're blogging for business. You do want to make sure, if you can, that grammar is correct, that spelling is correct, but people read blogs for the content, and the search engines are looking for search engine optimization capability, not necessarily how well you write and how engaging you write. So if you can email, you can also blog, because you can also update them by email, and you can also update them with a smartphone as well. Although I would imagine writing a blog post on a smartphone and then emailing it to your blog to post might be a little time consuming, unless you're extremely comfortable with it. Now this is kind of interesting because while this is an older screenshot, this is extremely applicable to now. I should probably do a new screenshot since this is now 6 years old. But if I looked at traffic from my current website, this has now, from a site that I used way back when, and I actually used this specifically as an older example. If you look at my statistics for the graph that this would be, which wouldn't be long enough to show on the screen, for example, back here, very few visits. Right now, I realistically only blog about once a month, just because I don't have much time to blog more than that. But my statistics from my visits, I now have about 6,000 readers per month, and that has remained consistently even when I have stopped blogging for a couple of months. Because once you start getting residual traffic on blog posts, you keep getting visits to older ones. Like, I still have one of my heaviest visited blog posts is one that I wrote between 2009 and 2010. And I still get an average of several hundred visits, per week, sometimes per day, depending on whether someone has come across it and linked to it, from that blog post that's now 6 years old. So it's interesting that the residual, like, even if you stop blogging for 6 months, don't abandon your blog forever. Don't take it down, because that long-term value from that content that's going to be there will help your business get found, no matter how old it is. I actually got a business referral from someone just last month, from someone that had written a blog post 4 or 5 years ago. And it was based on the fact that they were looking at, how to stop employee theft in restaurants, for example. And they called me because of it, and I got a new client. But that's just an example of, how that information can stay around long term and help the business. So here's a somewhat newer one. This is not mine. This is another one, but just in terms of consistency, in terms of, like, this person stopped blogging almost completely, and then they abandoned it, but they were still getting traffic consistently. They stopped blogging, I think, around, I would have to say, 2013, and then they kept getting traffic almost consistently. It was down a little bit in 2 years, but not by a lot. And then when you're posting things, it does help if you share that link. So if you're on LinkedIn, for example, if you share your blog posts on LinkedIn, if you have a Facebook business page, if you share those blog posts on your Facebook business page, and depending on how applicable it is to people that you're connected with on Facebook personally, sharing it onto your own personal page. But any place that's online that you can share it, share that blog post, because the more you share it, the more visits you'll have. Now, photo copyright is something that I do bring up. Extremely, extremely important, especially if you're blogging, because it's just as important on a blog as it is on your website. Now, most images have watermarks on them. Getty Images and iStock Photo. iStock Photo is actually now owned by Getty Images. And the reason I use Getty Images for an example of this is a photograph, for example, and this is my photograph, but this has a digital embedded watermark in it that you can't see. And Getty Images also uses digital watermarks that are also embedded. So you might see this publicly, but you might not see it if it's been purchased for use on a website. Now, Getty does not sell its images. They rent them, sort of like a pay-per-use, and a lot of Getty's images have shown up on some of the free stock photo sites. So if you're looking for images to use on your blog, be very, very cautious of the free stock photo sites, because a lot of people have gotten in trouble for it, both on their blogs and on their websites, because they think this is a free photo, I don't see a watermark on it, and it's free for use. Getty Images is one of the worst ones out there, because if they're little digital spiders that roam the web looking for illegal usage of your photos finds you, they will immediately send you a cease and desist letter, cease and desist and takedown notice. And even if you remove the photo right away, they will bill you for anywhere from $1,500 up to $3,000 or more dollars, and send collections after you to call you daily until you cave and pay up. So it's extremely important, if you put photos on your blog posts, which are very important, and I do very much encourage you to do so, make sure that you have where they're coming from and the provenance of that. Dreamstime.com is one of my personal favorites. You can buy inexpensive stock photos for $1. Sometimes, if you're looking for higher resolutions ones, you wanted to use them for a website, you wanted to use them for print, they offer all different sizes and all different resolutions. iStockPhoto.com is another good one. Fotalia, BigStockPhoto.com. I would recommend, if you do check out iStockPhoto and you find a photograph that you like on there, check on Dreamstime as well, because a lot of the same photographers sell on both sites, and you might actually find the photograph on Dreamstime quite a bit less expensive than on iStockPhoto. Some free sites that are out there, and here's a double clutch for anybody that's in Toastmasters out there. I'll have to fix that. Stock Exchange and Morguefile. Stock Exchange generally requires attribution, and Morguefile does generally not. Morguefile, I would say, is marginally safer, because you can track down the photographers and connect with them and ask them, are these your photos? But realistically, the only really, really safe photos that are out there are ones that you've taken, you've purchased, or you have explicit permission from the actual photographer who's taken them. If you're looking for some higher end photos out there, you're looking for particular photos of something, I would suggest, and I found this has worked very, very well for businesses, is go out and find some starting photographers or college students taking photography classes, because if you approach them and say, I'm looking for some photos, I'd be happy to give you attribution, and if you have a website, give you a link back, they're very, very happy to let you use their photos for free. So it's a great way to utilize some nicer photos than you might come across, or some actually more realistic in some cases than any just stock photos that you come across. There are also sites like Flickr, and if you use Flickr photos, for example, there's Creative Commons and usage rights. You need to read those very, very carefully before you use those photos. Getty Image also puts their photos on Flickr, for example. Willio is a stock photo site that you can put in particular terms and search for specifics, but again, you really need to be careful of Creative Commons licenses and where the provenance of those photos are from. So photo recommendations, if you can put photos in a blog post, photos are what sell. That's what's getting attention to the blog post itself. Depending on your business, if you start something like a Pinterest board, for example, make sure that you pinning your photos from your blog to Pinterest boards. Very, very good for search engine optimization and also to promote further readership of your blog. And so this is kind of just a rundown of what I was talking about of finding a photographer, using them from a reputable stock site, or using Creative Commons photos, but very, very carefully. So I have a little homework for you guys. In the handouts to the right, and you don't have to do this now, there's one sheet called blogging homework. And if you can download that, that would be fantastic. And either after the webinar or when you have a chance to take 5 or 10 minutes and just think about blogging. This is kind of just a starter, because once you've started to put some information down there, your creative juices will kind of get flowing a little bit, and then you have some blog posts to start with. Now, some additional uses for a blog. If you have an HTML website, for example, that you have a web designer that you need to pay to make updates, a blog site is very, very useful for extending the reach of your website. So you had a special offer going on and you don't want to pay your web designer $300 or $1,000 or however much they charge to either create a custom page for this or to update an existing page. You can create multiple pages on a blog, or you can use them as a blog post for something specific that you're promoting, whether it's a special offer, a special sale, or just something in general. Your business won a new award. You can use this as an extension of your website to add additional information out there online. And I love blogs because Google and Bing and Yahoo and the other search engines, when you post something on a blog, it generally takes about 2 hours for the search engines to come along and pick up that new content. When you update something on your website, even if it is a WordPress.org website, it generally takes longer than that, and the search engines don't necessarily give it the same interest value, if you can call it that. Now, if you have this custom page, for example, you can use this on your Twitter profile if you haven't, and you can also use it in email mailings. One of the things about blogs and all other social media is you really need to promote it. People don't just necessarily come across looking for, M&M construction, blogs. They won't Google that. But if they're looking for something specifically, they'll be putting something unrelated into Google search and come across your blog. But you'll get more traffic from your blog itself and from Facebook or Twitter or whatever other social media channels you're using if you promote them. So put a link on your website, put it into your email signature, for example. Make sure if you have print literature, don't just say find our blog, actually give people the blog URL that they can type in and find. And that's important long term because you need to promote it just like anything else. Now, Easter egging blog posts is another way to promote readership and also to promote some more readership from other social media channels if you're using them, or from newer posts to older posts. And what Easter egging is in the text of a new blog post, you're going to write something saying, in a blog post we wrote 2 years ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, and then actually give the link to that other blog post, we talked about this. Come and find this. Come and read this. This is applicable to this particular blog post because it's related. And that's called Easter egging because you're extending the value of your current blog post and driving traffic to a former post that way. And write a blogging schedule for yourself. This is really, really important, not just for blogging, but for any other social media that you're doing, because it gives you a little bit more stick-with-itness. What I recommend, especially if you're blogging, is set aside a certain time of day, either once a week, once every couple of weeks, or once a month, and say, I am going to blog. And you might find yourself, getting up at 2 a.m. like I sometimes do and say, I've got this great idea, I've got to write it down. Don't stifle that. You have to get it out of your system. But blogging can be difficult because if you say, I need to write a blog post, once or twice a week or once every, couple of weeks, and you end up getting, what they call brain freeze, you don't necessarily have to because the topic that you're going to write about is not necessarily going to be set in stone. And that's the nice thing about blogging because you can write about anything you want. There's no really rules to this. It's all about the content though. So if you wanted to write, you said, I'm going to write about this particular thing this particular week, and you don't feel like writing it, make a list up of things you want to write about, and then use that as an idea list. So say you had planned to write about this particular thing this week, and you don't really feel the love going on, and you don't want to write about it, start a list and then go back to that, because then you might want to write about something else. What I would recommend in terms of ideas for writing blog posts is start going out there and finding some industry blogs that are in the industry that you are and checking them out, and bookmark the interesting ones and bookmark the ones that you think would be interesting to write about, because you're not going to steal their content. I would really recommend don't taking their content from them, but read the blog post itself, read the title, bookmark it, and just use it as a reference because you might have your own completely different take on it. But this will give you a benchmark and some ideas to start getting going with, what you want to do out there. And I would recommend in all of this stuff, if you're using social media or if you're just going to use a blog, make sure you keep track of it and save these sheets and revisit them every few months. Keep a long-term goal out there. I want to gain readership of this, and make sure that you're actually doing it. Because, some people start a blog, some people start Facebook, they start Twitter, and they write one or two blog posts and then they give up and say, well, I didn't get anything out of it. Well, blogging especially is really a long-term commitment. You can't say, I wrote one or two blog posts and it didn't work for me, so I'm not going to use it. You have to give it some time to start up with readership, to get itself out there. And in order to do that, you need to give yourself homework to make sure that you actually are doing it. So two really good resources out there, copyblogger.com, socialmediaexaminer.com, I mentioned that before. They both have free email subscriptions. And the nice thing about blogs is there are statistics. Both blogger.com and WordPress, if you have Google Analytics for your website in order to track, you can integrate both of those into your blog posts, and you can get very, very specific feedback about where links are coming from. So if you posted your blog link on Facebook, for example, this will actually tell you, like in this particular blog post, we got 26 incoming links from a blog post that we posted the link and the URL into Facebook, for example. So they directly click through and hopefully read the whole thing. Now, blog posts can be, you can do a lot with this. For example, you can embed videos into it, which is interesting. So if you have a YouTube video that you've done or a Vimeo video that you've done, or you have a video that you want to use as an example, YouTube is kind of fair game in terms of usage. The one thing you do want to be cognizant of is it really is polite if you're using someone else's video as an example for something. You want to say, well, this is a great example of someone doing wood turning. Send them a nice email and say, by the way, I came across your video. I'm going to use it in my blog. Just wanted to tell you how terrific it is. If they have a problem with it, they will tell you. I have never yet run into someone where they've been sent an email or been contacted and saying, I love the video, I want to use it as an example of something, because you're helping to promote them. Now, WordPress pre-scheduling posts, this is great. Blogger, you can also do this. And this is nice in terms of, as you start blogging, you're going to want to keep track of the best days to publish your blog post and the best times. There is no perfect method to this. You will come across some marketing things that say, oh yes, you should be publishing your blog posts on this particular time and this particular day, but realistically that's not necessarily accurate, because you're going to have to think about, well, am I publishing my content because my content wants to go out to a worldwide audience that buys from me, or a hyper-local East Coast based only? My blog content, for example, I try to publish, when I do publish, consistently on Tuesdays if I can, and then between 7 and 9 o'clock. And what's interesting is my blog, for example, is geared towards the small lodging industry. And I get my readers over here that read my blog posts, they read it generally before they have guests coming down for breakfast. I also have a huge readership over in the UK, and they read it in the evening. So think about who is your target market when you start scheduling these things, and do a little bit of change it up a little bit and find out when you're getting the most hits, basically, and the most readership from your blog post. This will take a little while to figure out what's the best time period. But like Facebook, if you have a Facebook business page, you can go into Insights and see the same thing. It will give you best times of day to publish, best days of the week to publish. And I would actually recommend, if you're finding that Facebook, for example, you're getting consistently good traffic on a certain day between a certain time period, start trying to schedule your blog posts within that time period as well, especially if you're going to import that blog post with the blog title and the URL into your Facebook business page. So does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Let's see. So Blogger, you can pre-schedule posts as well. And pre-scheduling posts can be useful for any format that you're using for a variety of reasons. I have a couple of clients that I work with that have actually written their blog posts up for the next 6 months. And they've pre-scheduled all of them. And they kind of have to set it and forget it. They think they took about 5 or 6 hours and wrote up short and sweet blog posts. Their blog posts basically consist of a photo and a paragraph. And I like blogs because they don't have to be novels. They can be short and sweet. They can be a photo or 2 photos or 3 photos and a couple of lines of text or just a paragraph of text. One of the ideas that you can use for blogging, for example, as I mentioned before, is coming across another blog or coming across an article and using that as an example. And you don't want to copy and paste more than a couple of sentences out of another blog or article you're referencing, because Google will see that as duplicate content and they will negatively ding your own blog. But you do want to necessarily say, hey, I came across this blog post about XXX. Here's the link to it. Here's a couple of sentences that I found really interesting. And then you can write about that with your own take on it, why you agreed with it, why you thought it was fantastic, why you disagreed with it, why it was something you thought, they could have talked about this, but I think they left this out. So use other people's content as a starting point for your own content. And that's, again, another reason to start bookmarking ones that are necessarily industry related, especially if they're not your competition, but they are industry specific. Now, there's a lot of tools out there to make your life a lot easier when you're blogging. One of them I particularly love is called workflowy.com. This is free, and it's a great place to put information in here. You can do hot links, so I could go to a particular website and just copy the link in, and then it will be hot. And then you can put text in it. And the reason I love Workflowy particularly is because all of these things can be moved up and down. They can have subheaders. When you've completed them, you can actually cross them off. So you could keep an ongoing list of, topics for a blog, for example, that you're doing. And then as you work through the list, you can just cross the ones off so you're not duplicating yourself. Another one is Trello.com. Again, this is a free one. Very, very useful. You can just basically, this is drag and drop so that when you're done with one particular thing, you can just drag it into you're currently working on it, and then you can drag it into done. And you can have a lot of different boards within this for organization purposes. Twitterfeed.com is very, very useful because if you have a Twitter account, for example, you can set your blog post to feed automatically into Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, and Twitter, I would say, is probably by far one of the hardest social media channels for people to really, wrap their head around and understand. And it can also be the most time consuming because once people get into it and they really understand it, they're like, wow, I didn't know there was all this stuff out there. But Twitter, for example, has something called the Fire Hose. It's an agreement with Google that Google had with them years ago. It got shut off for a bit, and it's now been re-enabled. So Twitter itself is very, very good for search engine optimization. So when you have content that's being fed from your blog into Twitter as well, Google especially is going to pick up on that content from Twitter, and it's now showing up within search results. That might change again, but probably not anytime soon. The other thing that you can use is there's this little, this is in Google Chrome, this is a little icon, or I'm drawing a blank right now, an addition that you can add to your toolbars in any browser. This is Pinterest, this is Buffer, this is one called Pocket, for example. And Pocket basically just stores links and categorizes them. So you can go to, CNN Money, for example, had a great article about something. So you could bookmark it basically in Pocket with particular tags and then reference it. This is a screenshot of Google+. Google+ is going through some major changes right now. I don't necessarily recommend that you not use it, but I don't necessarily recommend that you do use it right now because it is going through so many changes. For quite a while, it was very, very good for posting your blog posts in for that social media and for that search engine optimization value in it. Right now, my own analytics that were formerly showing up as I'm getting incoming links to my blog posts from Google Plus are now just showing up as Google, so it's not separating it out anymore. And this is just within the last couple of weeks that this has changed this. So I might have an answer whether it's got search engine optimization value to post in maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe in a month, or maybe never at this point. We don't know at this point. So this is what Pocket looks like. It's getpocket.com. And then you can go through and then you can see, different things that you might have saved, both for blogging ideas or for things for reference. Now, Buffer app is my own personal favorite. This cuts down on a lot of the time-consuming perspective of if you're posting to social media channels. So say you have a LinkedIn business page, your Google Plus page, your Twitter page, Facebook business page. Buffer app has two different formats. It's got a free version where you can connect up to 3 different social media channels and a paid version. The paid version is about $10 a month, and it lets you connect a lot more of the social media ones. Bufferapp.com, I really recommend for business, just start out with a free one. That's all you really end up needing. And then connect the accounts. And then as you have your blog posts, leverage them in so that they self-publish, so to speak, to the other social media channels that you're occupied on. This lets you schedule up to 10 posts in advance for free. And the schedule can be anything you want. So you could write your blog post on Monday, have it published on Monday, and then you could have it go out, on Tuesday, and then you could have it go out again the following Friday. You can also schedule the particular time of day, and it has analytics. You can actually track the number of click-throughs that you're getting from the links itself. Now, this is what I was talking about. If you have Pinterest or something you're going to start, make sure that you pin those photos from, this is my blog, make sure you pin those photos to your Pinterest board. Again, very, very good for search engine optimization and for gaining more readership for the blog posts themselves. Now, Blogger can be sent out to all of these tools using Buffer app. There's another one called Hootsuite. I have to be honest, I'm not that fond of Hootsuite lately. They changed the format about a year ago, and it's not quite as user-friendly, and it does glitch out quite a bit more than it used to. But there are additional free tools out there that you can use. So does anybody have any questions? So, so why should I be blogging? Well, I guess in a nutshell, primarily search engine optimization value is number one. Being able to put yourself out there as an expert in whatever you do. So if you're a lawyer, and I actually know quite a few lawyers that have blog posts, you can use that to put yourself out there and say, because I know in a lawyer's case, and that's why I'm using it as an example, there's a lot of information you can't blog about a court case you're working on or had worked on because of confidentiality, but there are a lot of applicable things about, how do I find a good lawyer? There's so many topics that you can use that are, law related as an example. And I know one particular lawyer that blogs once a month, and she's been blogging now for about 3 years, and she's gained several dozen clients from her blog. And it's also helped her cut down on the amount of time that she's had with people fishing, for example. Like someone will call her up and say, I have a divorce case that I'm going through, and I have a child, and I don't know the current custody laws for Connecticut. Can you help me out? And before, because that technically is called unbillable time for her, she would spend half an hour to sometimes an hour on the phone with someone that's basically calling her up looking for free, unsolicited information. And so because she can't bill for that time, she's losing that amount of time that she could be making money. And so what she's written up is some resource posts just for this particular example. Here's where you go if you're getting a divorce and you're looking for child custody current laws, and she keeps it up to date if the laws change. And so she can say to that person that's looking for that information, hey, I wrote a blog post about it, which is pretty applicable. Let me send that to you by email. If you have any further questions, give me a call. And in a lot of cases, those people will come back to her and say, well, thank you for that great information. We'd really like to use you as our lawyer, just as an example of that. Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions? I know we kind of covered a lot tonight, or today rather. If you do have additional questions that you might think of after the fact, my email is in the confirmation that you got for this webinar. I hope you guys learned something today. If you have questions about any other social media, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help. And I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend, and hope we don't get hit too much by that snowstorm. So goodbye, everybody.